Today I want to show you my worm filter. My worm filter is a method of harvesting the vermicompost. It is related to it's called light exclusion or piles in light. And that's the method where you make the pile of worms and bedding after they've finished eating everything. You've got finished vermicompost that you want to harvest, and so you pile it up. The light drives the worms downward, and you pull off the top layer of worm-free vermicompost. You give it a little more time, and you pull off another layer. You give it a little more time, pull off another layer. Unfortunately, as you get down towards the bottom where the worms get real thick, they jam up. They have a traffic jam. And so the worm filter is kind of nice because being with the open holes and with new bedding below there, the worms have got a place to go. And so it makes this harvesting of vermicompost a lot easier. This is for harvesting vermicompost. It drives the worms into new bedding. If I were harvesting worms for sale, what I do is I do piles and light onto a solid surface. I do that struggle to get it to pure worm flesh so I can measure it for sale. But this is when I just want the vermicompost, which is most people want vermicompost for their garden. This gives you a nice easy way to grab it. Let me show you the worm filter real quick, then I'll do a close-up of the bed. We'll show the worms in their finished compost. We'll move that out of the way, show the new bedding, lay out the filter, pile on the old the vermicompost with worms, and we'll get them moving. My camera gives me a 15-minute window to take this, so I will probably make them go fast. What that means is I will be pulling some worms with my harvest. They'll go into the 5-gallon bucket. Normally I would go slower and get a little more pure on my vermicompost. The nice thing is that in this harvest with a lot of worms caught in the harvest vermicompost, I will then do worm traps, which is also known as bait cups. And all those worms will just slip into the bait cup and will also harvest out nicely. I have many methods of harvest, so I always combine them. First, here's my filter. What arrives is a yellow sandbag. Yellow sandbag is used because it is sunproof. The filters themselves do break down under UV light, and the sandbag is designed to sit outside. So it gives you a real nice protection from the sunshine. Your worm filter then lasts longer. Hopefully years and years. Filter arrives with the very simple instructions. Very simple. It shows, these instructions show laying a thin layer. Today what I'm going to show you is doing a thick layer. Both work just fine. The thin layer is kind of satisfying because you lay out the thin layer, all the worms disappear, you then lift the vermicompost, shake it into your bucket, do another thin layer. Today's demonstration, I'm going to lay out a thick layer, the worms will go down, I'll scrape, put that in a bucket, scrape, put that in a bucket, scrape, put that in a bucket. The worm filter, there's two filters in there, the larger one, the smaller one. It just makes it more convenient for your different sizes of bin. And also, when you do a big harvest, you can lay them out side by side. That gives you a nice wide area of several square feet to do your harvesting. The worm filter is essentially an onion bag or a potato bag. What that means is that it's a double layer of mesh. When I've tried making it a single layer, it doesn't work nearly as well. The double layer gives the worms that double layer to go through, which means they actually complete the transit. With the single layer, I find that the worms go halfway because then they can live halfway in their worlds, new and old. The double layer makes them finish the move, makes it an easier harvest. So, given all this, let me set up my bin, move my camera, let's watch the filter in action. Thank you. Okay, we are recording. I could adjust just a little bit. Nah, we're good. We're good. All right. Okay, so now we're recording the harvest. I want to first show you the bin of finished vermicompost. There should probably be some worms on top. Let's find out. So this here's my worm blanket. In this case, it's a feed bag. Let's get this out of the way. With the feed bag, what the worm blanket does is it helps moderate the humidity of the bed. It also keeps the humidity in the bed so there's a little less on the walls. If the walls are wet, the worms like to wander around. So there are just a few worms on the surface, and let's see how many we have down below that have eaten all of their vermicompost. Not too thick, but it'll be a nice start for the new bed. These being all adult red wigglers, that means that as they go into the new bed, they should start laying cocoons pretty soon, pretty quick. So I'm going to push this around basically to loosen up the bed, and then I'll pull it out of the way and show you the new bed that they're going into. I'm ending up today with a nice fluffy harvest. That'll make it easy to harvest and show you a fine typical harvest. I want you to know that the worm filter is also convenient for harvesting when you're lumpy and wet. When it's lumpy and wet, what you can do is let the worms harvest from between the lumps. Then you give the lumps a squish. What goes on is that pushes the worms out of the lump. They go back to harvesting right around the lumps again. I hope that made sense. So anyways, there's my bed. What I'm going to harvest. Let me move this bed out of the way, and you'll see the bed below. Okay, let me take a look at the camera. Looks like a good view of the opened bin. On here you see the filter I'm going to use. Let me set that to the side. The warm blanket that's ready for the new bed. This, it turns out, is a brewing bag. Anything sort of plasticky works great as a worm blanket. A lot of people use bubble wrap. Okay, so here's the new bed of fresh cardboard compost. Mixture of cardboard, spent grains, coffee grounds, azomite, I believe some oyster shell in here. I'm going to fluff it a little bit because being squished the way it was by the other bin makes the excess, who knows. Do the worms care? Who knows. I care. I want my worms happy. So it's spread all the way out to give the maximum room for the worms to travel through the filter. We got some big chunks. Always fun to tear up the big chunks after they've been wetted and composted, because that makes the cardboard, of which I use very thick cardboard. It comes from a fruit and vegetable supplier. So I use very thick, very tough cardboard to compost. You see how soft it gets. So here's my filter. We'll spread the filter out over the surface. You'll notice maybe that this filter is worn. This one is a couple years old. Alright, ready for my worms. Here you go, little travelers. Oh, I do love this vermicompost. Should make the garden very happy. This is actually my favorite part of the worm composting. It's just generically playing in the bed. Whether I'm doing a feeding, a harvest, or initial setup, just playing in the dirt. I guess that's what makes worm composting fun. I would say fun for a boy, but I know lots of you girls are out there doing this too. The fun part is just basically playing in the dirt. Alright, so there is my thick bed. The worms will start moving down. I could talk to things about the harvest technique called agitation. What we're going to do is we're going to let the worms not enjoy the light shining down on them, and then they'll move in. I'll probably go fast forward or even skip forward, but you'll see them moving downwards, and If I'm not happy with how fast they're moving, sometimes their actions compress the bed. So then I can agitate the bed a little bit, which is basically stir it and soften it. And each time you soften the bed, the worms feel exposed and they move down a little quicker. So I'm going to give them a couple minutes. According to the clock, it says it's 4:37 in the afternoon. I'll probably do my first scrape before 4:40. So we're talking 2 and 3 minutes. Let's see how the worms do. Go ahead and push along. Taking off quite a thin layer in this case, because I'm seeing the worms show up right away. And as mentioned before, there will be some worms in my harvest. I have an additional harvest technique of worm traps, also known as bait cups. The few worms that are left in this harvest, we'll put a cup perforated container with some fresh compost and even some food in it, buried into the harvested vermicompost. And the little worms, in this case the adult worms, will crawl into the cup, and they do that within a couple of days. I can then pull out the cups with those worms and have absolutely clean vermicompost. Typically what I do in this kind of harvest is, these are adults, so they're laying cocoons into this bed. So when I do this harvesting, I put that into another tray and I bury those worm traps in there. After a couple of days, I pull out the adults and the juveniles that are in there, and then I give it a week or 2 or 3 for the cocoons to hatch. So what I'll see is in the first few days I'll do the bait cups, and the bait cup is full of the adults and juveniles, and then a week or 2 later the bait cup's filled with babies. I don't know if you've struggled with them, but babies are hard to harvest because they don't want to move. They're able to hide among the grains and lumps of the vermicompost. So this kind of piles and light doesn't work nearly as well when you've got a bed full of babies. When you've got a bed full of babies, bury the bait cups and give them a week. They harvest themselves. Checking my clock. There's been the next minute, so I'll wait another minute and a half. We'll do the next scrape. What else can I tell you about this? The original worm filter was a couple of produce bags, 3 produce bags from my kitchen. I knew that the mesh would work well to harvest, but it wasn't enough area. I sewed them together over the course of a couple of evenings. I tried it out with some completed vermicompost, and it worked like a charm. So I knew that I had to get a bigger version. I went into farm supply companies, found where they have the large produce bags. That's what these are, large produce bags. They sell them in bundles of 100, so it doesn't do my customers much good to order them directly. So what I'm doing is the service of ordering the bundles of 100 produce bags, packing them in that light resistant bag that protects them, and then selling them and sending them to you. Okay, I'm at the about 2-minute mark, so I am going to pull another layer. Here we go. It's very soft, and I can find the occasional worm in there. When I do piles and light, of which I'll make a video because I enjoy my technique of a 2-stage pull. When I do piles and light, I pull the top layer off to one corner, usually at one corner of an empty bin. I then get a chance to look through that as I get ready to throw it into the bucket and find the little ones and throw them back. Makes my piles and light a little more effective, but I find that piles and light takes a lot of time. As opposed to the worm filter, especially the worm filter done overnight. Okay, there's 2 good scrapes. I'm going to give it a little agitation to make sure the bed stays soft and the worms move faster. There's quickly a very nice change in depth. Gives me a chance to look for things that are not completed composting. Those will go into the next bin. All right, let's see how our timing goes. Okay, the worms have moved nicely. Wanted to show you that it's not just light exposure that scares the worms to make them burrow. Sometimes they can feel the breeze on them, and so I will occasionally give them a little blow-on. Give them a puff of air and see sometimes does that motivate them. Let's see if I can give a demonstration. This guy, maybe these guys. We'll see if it works. Who knows if the demonstrations, Murphy's Law says it won't work this time. Let's see. He reacted, and in he goes. So he moved. These guys not so much. There he goes a bit. All right. Made for a fun demonstration, but let's go ahead and pull the next layer. I am on the clock. As we pull these layers, occasionally exposes little bits of plastic. I believe that was a little bit of label. You also see little bits of plastic that are flat and kind of stiff. Those are typically the glue that they use to hold together the flaps on a cardboard box. Whereas the glue between the corrugations is some organic. Alright, the darn phone clicked out on me before 15 minutes. Who knows why he does that? We'll try to press forward. We'll find out in post-production, are things actually working? I'll still try to hold myself to that 15-minute limit just because it's a good demonstration of how well the worm filter speeds up this process. And also while I'm doing this, normally I would have 3 or 4 of these stacked side by side. So I would either wander off to go do some other work, or I would harvest in sequence. And that way, a couple minutes pulling the top layer from the other bins gives the first bin time to reset. And you see that we are already exposing parts of the filter. It's moving that fast. There they go. As I'm going too fast, I'm getting worms in my harvest. So now we'll give it the agitation again to see how deep we are. It's looking great. I'm going to throw in the edges. The edges come in. The nice part about throwing in the edges is not only does it stir the edge, but also it makes the bed a little deep again. Gives the worms a chance to move down again. We'll have to see if this is on camera. The worms here you can see are halfway through the mesh. If they show, let me lean into the camera screen. They do. Alright, so hopefully you've got enough of a view to show those worms. They should start moving down through the mesh itself. You notice they've wrapped themselves nicely in the mesh. Next they should finish their move downward into the new bed. This one here is a little high up. He may not be able to touch the bed. He'll be the challenge. Alright, let me check my clock and be back in a couple minutes. Okay, according to my clock that was 2 minutes. Nice move on the worms. I noticed the worms in the mesh have made their move down into the bed below. Wonderful. Next scraping. In the background you can hear my airport. Here in San Jose we very conveniently have 3 airports we can access. The San Francisco, the San Jose, and the Oakland airports. Makes my contact with the world very convenient. When I need to travel back to the Midwest to visit with family, easy to do. When I need to go on a trip, maybe down to Las Vegas to do a worm show or a waste show. Each of those were, again, easy, made for a fun trip. That's the joy of doing this fairly odd farming, is we have unique information as worm growers. Everywhere you go, you'll find people that have never heard of worm farming before. Strangely, people that are in waste disposal have never heard of worm composting as a way to get rid of waste. So we have a lot of educating to do to the public. There's a good scraping. Let's wait another 2 minutes. Okay, according to my clock, that was another 2 minutes. We're starting to get some of the slower worms. These are worms that, who knows, they're old, they're cold, they're tired, or they're lazy. They're not moving as fast. Sometimes throwing them off to just the mesh exposure gives them a little chance to move anyways. And sometimes it's time for them to join the circle of life. But let's give a scrape and see how we do. We're getting very close to the bottom. We'll be exposing more filter as we go. And I'll be doing that agitation thing again. Not so much for the bed being, well, compressed, but just generally to disturb the worms. Any of them that were getting complacent and had landed near to the bottom of this mesh and decided not to move, they're going to find they get bumped and they have to complete their movement down into their new home. Again, doing this, I find that the edges, I don't tend to scrape as well, and so they do better when I toss the edges back in. So, I've got a good spot of worm-free compost there, and that making a little ridge means I'll have a nice spot of basically worm-free compost there. And then rather than being crazy about it, we'll just go ahead and do our edge toss. Right, so I have good crisp edges. Let's give them their 2 minutes. Okay, there's about 2 more minutes. Let's go ahead and do our next scrape. I see one more. Rescued. And by the looks of it, I will have probably 3, maybe 4 scrapings left. Again, as I mentioned, the piles in light is difficult because they jam up at the bottom. Well, the worm filter isn't perfect. They do kind of resist the phase change of finished compost to worm filter to new compost. So there will be a little bit of a time delay for worm movement as we're down to the very bottom. That is contrasted, I guess. What's the word I'm looking for? In that the worms have less and less compost to hide in. So they feel more and more exposed and move faster. So they have that conflict between not wanting to touch something new but needing to move. Let's hope for the purposes of this demonstration that they are motivated to move by the exposure to light and alright, back to it. Tossing the edges, spreading it out thin. So you're now starting to see the effect of the normal harvest according to the instructions of making a thin layer. Because we are within 1 or 2 scrapings of being done. Okay, let's give them their 2 minutes. Alright, there's 2 minutes. I think the last round I should have piled it up to let them clear out, because this will be difficult to scrape. It's too darn shallow. But I'll scrape what I can, and if it does it just right, I'll be able to get it down to where the worms have nothing to hide in, and they'll do the last of their move on quick. As I toss each of these handfuls of vermicompost into the bucket, I'm having a little look to see if I've gotten any of these worms with it. You saw one time I did. There was probably another time not as noticeable. But the worms are cooperating wonderfully. In fact, I am going to pile it up. Pile it up. See, what do we got for worms going through? They look good. Alright, so I can do one more little stacking round, and that should get it down to where the last little bits would motivate the worms to finish. So it looks like there's one more scraping, one more spreading, and the spreading will probably then pick up the filter and call it done. So I'll see you in 2 minutes. I believe that was 2 minutes. I just got to staring at the worms and lost concentration of the clock. What was fun to do is standing in the background waiting for these guys to make their move, watching the worms that are on the mesh as they get motivated. The way that one goes. So let's scrape this one more good time. Give me still good, well cleared vermicompost. Oh, good worms, making their move. Let me see if there's one more worm. Got away. There it's got away. These guys get out of the way. Let me do another handful or two. The last of the deep spots. Looking for little dips in the filter, because that gives a place for them to hide. And so then I'm going to spread the last bits just out. Get rid of any place for the worms to hide at all. I'll walk away for another couple of minutes and we'll call this done. We'll have a little chat at the back end, show closing up the bin, and call it a harvest. So I'll see you in 2 minutes. Okay, that is our last 2-minute round of worm movement. We've got these few worms that are kind of stuck. Again, are they old, are they cold? Or who knows what worm reason they have for not completing the movement. Let's see what we've got attached to the filter. Ooh, nothing on the inside. It looks great. The worms have done a great job. Great job. And then we're going to peek under the filter. Usually we find 1 or 2 worms attached underneath. Here's one. And apparently we're in the clear. I'm going to shake the last of the vermicompost bits into the bucket. Let's have a look at the concentration of worms in their new bed. Oh, they look good. In fact, I can feel a little nugget of them down there. They're happy worms. So they've got a new home. I will check this bin in 3 weeks, see how they did. The professional worm growers, they're on a schedule. They have the very good SOPs and scheduling systems and help. Since I'm alone and I'm just playing with the worms, I'll check in about 3 weeks. If I'm happy with how many eggs they've laid, maybe I'll do this again to clear out from the cocoons, or maybe not. Sometimes I leave the worms to grow in the bin just as it is, and they make vermicompost for me to sell. So these worms were very well moved. Let's give them a worm blanket. I will close up this clamshell bin that I'm using here, stick a label on it, and be done. So what we found, this started at about 4:40. It's now 5:15. So that means that altogether it took 35 minutes to harvest a full bin, get pretty clean compost, and worms all growing well in their new bin. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon as we find more of these fun bits of Old Tom's wormery to do. The worms are a joy. I hope you enjoyed watching.